my subscriblings, and welcome to the next episode of the Persona series. For those of you who watched the introduction to this series, you may remember me saying that I wasn't sure what order I wanted to do the outfits in. Well, we got one persona down and I'm already not following the list. Not only that, but this persona isn't even on the list. Oops. It's not that big a deal. We will get to the others eventually. The main reason I'm doing this seemingly random addition is because of spooky season. The first persona was last year's Halloween costume, so this persona was this year's Halloween costume. And I know you might be thinking, why don't you just make one of the personas that's already on your list for Halloween? And that is a great question, and it has a simple answer. None of the personas on my list fit the Halloween theme this year, or the theme for Halloween this year. And the theme for Halloween, at least for me and my friends, was cryptids. So looking over my list of personas, I don't really have any cryptids on there. I did have a monster, but we already made that one. So, a new addition it is. And it fits the idea of the whole Persona series, so I wanted to add it in. Now that it's a part of the series, we can get started by discussing on what I am planning on doing. For starters, the cryptid I chose to dress up as is the Loch Ness monster. I think Nessie is my favorite cryptid mainly because she's an aquatic cryptid. And since I'm planning this outfit from scratch, I needed to look for inspiration. So, I turned to Pinterest. I didn't want my outfit just to be a dinosaur type outfit, I wanted it to be more of a humanized version of Nessie. So to get started, I kind of had an idea of the vibe I wanted, so I started looking up pictures that embodied what I was thinking of. A lot of these pictures remind me of what I can only describe as a bog witch. It's very eerie yet enchanting. There's something about it that I just adore and love, and I wanted my outfit to give off a similar feeling. Now, since I chose the Loch Ness monster, I need to tie in some things from how Nessie actually looks. And I know it's theorized that the Loch Ness monster is just a plesiosaurus, so I added a few pictures of those in there. And looking at what I found, I remembered a dress that I had seen on Etsy a couple years ago, and I loved it. It's kind of a combination of different fabrics and laces, and I love how it seems old and worn. After gathering these pictures and looking at them for a while, I felt I was ready to begin the sketch. For the actual design, I took the most inspiration from the dress I had seen on Etsy. For my design, I want to make it in 3 main parts: the corset, the sleeves, and the skirt. For the accessories, I want a wig that looks like an underwater plant, a veil, fake gills, flippers for the feet, a mask, teeth, and a tail. The tights will be for gloves. That way, I won't have to paint my entire body, I can just do my face. Sketching out the design wasn't as hard as I was expecting it to be. There honestly isn't a lot of accessories to this, and the design is fairly simple. Since this was for a Halloween party, and I had a shorter time limit on it, I didn't need it to be too complicated anyways. I think this sketch gets across what I'm wanting, so now it's time to move on to the next step and bring this sketch to life. Sometimes getting started on a big project like this can be overwhelming. I knew there was a lot that needed to be done, and all I had to do was get started. I decided the first thing I would work on was the corset. My brain decided that the top-down approach would be the easiest once again. For the corset, I knew I didn't have time to try and teach myself how to make a fabric corset from scratch, so I decided to make one out of Worbla. I remember years ago seeing people make cosplay pieces out of Worbla, and I had finally gotten my hands on some, so I wanted to give it a try. Full disclosure, I am not a professional at any of this in any way, shape, or form. I attempted to film some process footage, but it's not meant to be taken as a tutorial. I'll be posting in the description the links to all the videos that I used that helped me during this process. And I gotta say, all of those content creators were such a blessing and such a help in this process. In order to make my corset, I knew I needed a pattern, and the best way I saw to make a form-fitted pattern is to take plastic wrap it around your body, and then cover the desired area in tape. This process probably would have been much easier if I had someone to help me, but at the time, I didn't have anyone available to help me and I was too impatient to wait. I did, however, have my parents' cat with me to supervise and scream at me every now and then to make sure that I was okay. She was probably very confused as to why I kept wandering around the house with half my body taped up. The answer to that is because I kept running out of tape. It wasn't until I had run out of the first roll of tape that I remembered the tutorial said that you really only needed to tape up one side because you could mirror the pattern. Silly me. Oh well, I got it done in the end. And after getting it all taped out, I drew the lines to show the desired shape and then cut it out. The tutorial I watched suggests using foam for the inside of the corset. I already had a roll of foam, so I decided to use it. For future reference, I think the foam that I used was a bit too thick and ended up messing with the size a bit. So next time I attempt to make a corset out of Worbla, I will be using a thinner foam. After the foam was cut out, I used it as a pattern for the Worbla. I gave about an inch to the pattern, that way I could fold the edges over onto the foam and make it kind of a smoother edge. Assembling the Worbla and foam together was a long and slow process, but I eventually got it put together, and honestly the next part was the hardest part of the corset. It was figuring out how to make the cups, and it probably was not as hard as it should have been, but since this was my first time, it was a lot of trial and error. The tutorial I watched used a plastic sphere to shape the cups, but I didn't have that, so I was just using a pre-existing bra that I had, wrapped it in plastic, and then attempted to shape the Worbla. If I make another Worbla corset, I will definitely be getting a plastic sphere, because the bra method did not work out. It was difficult to keep the shape and attach it to the corset, but after I finally got it attached, and I shaped the corset to my body and then set it aside to begin the next part. For this costume, I decided I want to try and thrift all of my fabrics. The skirt is meant to be messy and worn, so I wasn't concerned about finding newer fabrics. Looking back at my design, I figured the easiest way to achieve the look I was going for would be to make a layered skirt and have each layer be a different fabric. So I headed off to the thrift store, and I ended up having to go to a couple different ones to find enough fabric for this project. But at the end, I walked away with a good variety, and when looking, I was mainly looking for colors and patterns. I think out of all of these, my favorite find was the striped pillowcases. I don't know, I think they added a nice amount of texture to the end product. And with the fabrics picked out, next was making the pattern. I had a difficult time finding a pattern for an asymmetrical skirt like I had drawn, so instead, I looked up tutorials for an A-line skirt and then just modified it to be shorter in the front. The tutorial I watched was specific to making a layered A-line skirt, and it was so helpful. Once I got the pattern made, I had to decide the layers and which fabrics I wanted to use where. Each layer was also going to need some lace at the bottom, so while I was figuring out the layers, I had a bunch of different scrap pieces of lace soaking in instant coffee to stain them to look a bit older than they actually were. And funny enough, 2 of the pieces just would not stain at all, and I kinda wish all of my clothes were made out of this stuff because it would make my life a lot easier. But with the laces attached, and with the layers figured out, I stitched it all together, added a zipper, and the skirt was done. And at this point, I was running low on time and still had the sleeves to do. I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of time on them, so I decided to shorten them instead of having them be long like the original design. One of the fabrics I had found was a bed skirt, and ended up being perfect for the short sleeves. I attached some elastic to the inside and stitched it together, and they were done as well. The ears were really simple to make. I made them out of leftover pieces of Worbla, and made them to slide over my ears so I wouldn't have to use any adhesive to attach it. The pattern for the ears I made myself, and it looked something like this. For the extra detail, I just used my hot glue gun and some paint. For the gloves, as I mentioned before, I used a pair of tights. I remember seeing a tutorial about cutting out a piece of cardboard that was in the shape of your hand and then just sticking it in the foot of the tights, so that's what I did, and then I hand stitched around it. I wanted to have webbed fingers, so I also attached some mesh fabric in between the fingers. For that, I just used liquid stitch, and if I had more time, I think I would have also preferred to hand stitch that on, because it doesn't look the greatest when you turn your hand over, but just for the effect, it got the job done. For the teeth, I used a non-toxic moldable plastic. If you do this, please, please, please be careful. The plastic gets very hot and needs to cool off a bit before you try to mold it into your teeth. Once I made them, I decided I didn't like the bright white color, so I also used coffee to stain them. As far as the bought items go, I bought the wig, the tights, and the boots. The wig and tights came from Amazon, the boots came from the same thrift store I bought some of the fabric from, and that was pretty much it. And with all of this, the outfit is complete, and it's time to show it off. You'll have to forgive me for not having too much footage with the face paint. The debut of this outfit was the night of my Halloween party, so I didn't get a lot of time to film myself in the costume, and I could not bring myself to paint my face again so soon after because I hate wearing makeup due to sensory issues. I've never really liked wearing makeup, and I cannot convince myself to put that face paint on again. I did use the Sunset colored foundation, and it wasn't all that bad, but again, due to sensory issues, it was a lot for me. But as you can see, comparing to the original design and the final product, I didn't get to every detail I would have liked to, but I'm still very happy with how it turned out. I got to practice a lot of new things for this one that I'm hoping to be able to use in future projects. Looking back onto the whole process, some things I would take away from this is don't be afraid to ask for help. The Warbler corset ended up being a bit big in some areas, and I think that would have been avoided had I waited to ask my friend to help me. Another thing is, if you're going to make an asymmetrical skirt where you can see the inside, don't forget to add a lining to it. I thankfully had a dress that I just put on underneath that hid most of it, but without it, the inside of the skirt looks rough. Other than those two things, I'm happy with how this came out. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it to the end, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Even if you just had me on while working on your own crafts and projects in the background, I'm honored. I am so thankful to have people that just enjoy watching the projects that I work on, because I'm very passionate about them, and getting to share my passion with other people, it makes me really happy, so thank you. And I hope that you will stick around because I have a lot more projects planned in the future. If you want to, I have a playlist that has all of the Persona videos in it so far, and there will be more, hopefully, soon to come. I hope to see y'all in the next video. See ya!